looking back at it, it was really, really cool.
Yeah.
During it was tough. It was a big mental battle. The physical side of it, I obviously had no idea before I started the record, but wasn't so difficult. I think your body just builds up a tolerance to playing that much golf. And so even now, if I play 36 holes, I struggle even after what I've done. And so I think there was that side of it, but the mental was the real tough part, is waking up again, stupid o'clock in the morning, rocking onto the first tee. You're meeting one or two mostly different people who are asking the same questions. I mean, you could be asked the same question 4 or 5 times in a day, because you'd be walking down the fairway or down the left side with one person, and then the guy on the other side of the fairway in the next hole might ask you the same question, and you'd get a lot of that. Again, if I was in their shoes, I would be doing the exact same thing, and I enjoyed it, and I made sure that I gave my all when it came to that kind of stuff, because I would be extremely curious about what kind of bonkers thing that guy is doing.
Welcome back to Fairways and Feelings, the podcast where we take a step off the golf course and into the lives of the people that are shaping the game. I'm Danny, and today I'm joined by Josh Simpson. Josh is a golfer from Norfolk in England, and he's the current world record holder for the most golf courses played in a 12-month period. Now, the record was at 580 before he had a crack at it, and you'd think you'd go for 581, right? No, he ended up playing 652 rounds in a single 12-month period, all on different golf courses. Now, I played 18 holes last week. I lost 4 golf balls, hurt my back getting out of a bunker, and needed about 3 working days to recover afterwards. So I don't really know how it's possible, but Josh just kept going. He kept going course after course, day after day, for an entire year. And in doing so, he raised almost £90,000 for Macmillan, the cancer support charity, and Tapping House, a hospice in Norfolk. And there's a good reason why he chose those charities in particular. Josh lost his mum to cancer, and it changed the way he looked at life. She died at 61, she never got to retire, and the idea of waiting for one day suddenly felt a lot less safe to him. And that became part of the reason he took on something so big. He seemed to have the sensible option in front of him, like staying in Norfolk, working for his family business, carrying on with a life that worked on paper, or he could buy a motorhome, travel around the country, and try to play more golf courses in a year than anyone had ever played. And he chose the unknown one. In this episode, Josh talks really honestly about grief, risk, the mental battle behind playing golf every day, and the strange come down after the record finished. As always, this episode is brought to you by Florio Golf, golf's mental health movement. We're here to make mental health feel normal in golf, less awkward, less hidden, a bit easier to talk about in actual human words. And part of that work is Healthy Minds Golf Club, our online mental fitness hub for golfers. It's where you'll find honest stories from golfers like Josh, along with simple guides and tools to help you handle life's ups and downs a bit better. Take a look. I'll leave a link to it in the show notes below. But let's jump into it. Here's Josh Simpson. How are you out of 10, and why?
Out of 10, I'd give it a good 7 at the moment. I think it was probably a little lower just after the world record finished, because there was a big jump to reality again. It was a rather big shift from the kind of highs of the world record to now just nothing happening all of a sudden back in Norfolk, where I probably don't want to be for the rest of my life. So it's a little quiet. It's a little out of the way in terms of where a lot of my friends are. So, I'd probably say that it could be a bit better, but it's certainly not bad.
Okay. And what do you think would get? I mean, 7's not bad, but is there anything that you think could get that number higher anytime soon?
Yeah, I just think a little bit of stability, really. I'm at the age now where I want to be moving out and trying to kind of forge my own path, so to speak. So getting a job and something, I've kind of accepted the fact that I want to move away and I want to relocate for a job. So I think that would probably help. But I think that's pretty much it from a golfing perspective. I'm fairly happy with way things are going at the moment. I'm still enjoying getting out there and playing. And I've got a good group of friends around me.
That's good. That's good to hear. And good to hear you still enjoy going out there after last year's adventures.
Yeah, it was. No, I think one thing I'd miss the most is probably going down the range and actually hitting a few balls and practicing, because that was one thing I just could use to zone out quite well, and I didn't really get a chance to do it a lot last year. And if I was pretty crazy to do so.
Imagine, yeah. You mentioned Norfolk. That's where you are now. Is that where you grew up as well?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm born in Kings Lynn, and I've lived here my whole life.
Okay. And as a kid growing up in Norfolk, let's go back to that. What kind of kid were you?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably quite annoying growing up, annoying little kid. We lived in quite a rural, well, we still do live in quite a rural area, but we lived kind of in a lay-by of a main road, on a little row of cottages, and so it was quite tough. I didn't really have that kind of, going out with your mates mentality after school, because it was quite isolated and I'd need to get a car to go anywhere.
Right.
I moved when I was about 13, so then I had that, whereas you go down the park and play football with your mates a little bit more. I swapped schools about year 9, so it was a little bit turbulent, just because obviously that upset the dynamic a little bit. I lost a few friends and, moving school, and it was obviously, it was quite overwhelming to start a new school, but I think it's probably for the best, because the school I went to start with didn't have the best reputation. But yeah, no, it was good growing up. I had 2 really loving parents, and, they looked after me very well. They raised me the right way. I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, no, I think for the most part, it was a fairly uninspiring but a pretty good childhood.
And you briefly mentioned parents there. What kind of family dynamic did you have? Were you close to your parents?
Yeah, so yeah, mum and dad were together, and I think, well, at that point I had a fair few grandparents still alive, so yeah, I went and saw them a good amount. Aunties and uncles were all kind of scattered across the place. We've got some in the States, and I think Norwich and Newcastle, and all over the shop. So yeah, I kind of saw them every now and again, but probably not as much as we would have liked to.
Yeah. And how did golf come into the picture?
It's a good question. I remember Dad got a membership the day that I was born to a golf club. He got accepted for his membership. I think that probably says a lot.
On the day. That's
on the exact day. I'm an April 1st baby, and that's where the membership started.
Okay.
So that was the April Fool joke in itself, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I remember Dad would try and get me into it when I was younger, and we just went down this little kind of pitch and putt course, and I think Dad bought me a brand new set of clubs, and I probably used them once or twice and then never used them again. But it was at that age where I was playing every sport. I was doing scouts, I was doing trampolining, football, cricket, swimming. There was so much, and golf was the loose end there, really, because it was the boring one, and it's probably not the typical sport if you say sport, especially as a kid growing up. So that was the first one to go. But probably about 16, I started going again, and found a few pals to go with. And I remember it became an addiction very quickly. I remember going to college, and I used to have the Wednesdays off, so I'd get mum to drop me down at the golf club on a Wednesday morning, and I'd be there all day, play 36 holes, have lunch in between, and obviously the summer holidays then came in, and I'd be doing that more and more, and yeah, then the fascination kind of started, playing different golf courses.
Yeah, it's Excuse me. It was a funny one, isn't it? Growing up, is exactly right. When you're younger as a kid, especially here in England, there's so many other sports that kind of tear you in different directions, right? That are, as a kid, more exciting, right? You've got
Mm.
the, like you said, the classic football, rugby, cricket. Golf kind of oftentimes can take a bit of a backseat, for what I've seen. And then as you've grown up, as you said, around 16, it kind of spurs your interest a little bit more, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. It's one of my biggest regrets is not starting earlier, but I
Mhm.
started pretty early compared to a lot of people that I chat to. So it's that kind of catch-22. But I remember playing it. I was 16 and I was playing with guys who were 2 years younger than me who were off 4, and I was cracking on at starting at 28 and at 16. I mean, I came down pretty quickly because I was playing with them all the time, and I'd learn pretty quickly what I should and shouldn't do. And I hit a bad shot or maybe a course a shot that didn't really make a lot of sense, and they'd be straight on it. And down in the evenings, you'd be able to drop a few balls down and practice it the way that, or they could show you an example of what they meant. And yeah, you learn pretty quick. I think even on the old system, I went from 28 to 12 in a year.
Great. That's really good. Yeah. It's the best way to learn, though, isn't it? And I mean, golf is one of the great things about it, is that age doesn't really matter.
Mm.
It's you can start whenever you want. You never have to quit. It's something that kind of goes with your life. I even think, I might be completely wrong here, but I think Nick Faldo and even Colin Montgomery didn't actually start golf until later in their life as well. Probably, I think it was around 16 that Nick Faldo started as well. And
Yeah,
you know what happened to him, how he did. So
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
doesn't always mean everything. Um, and in terms of away from the golf course, so what kind of career line did you go into?
I did a bit of everything, to be honest. I started, I think, from school, or after college, I went into estate agency. That was good fun, selling some houses. I found that really interesting, and I was quite a confident person, and I think that was quite a good fit. But it was just the company that I worked for
Mm.
uh, didn't have the best reputation, and I think looking back on it, there was a high staff turnover there for a reason, which is that they just worked you under a bus, and they didn't really care. I then I managed a fish and chip shop for a couple of
Oh,
years,
really?
some factory work, and then I ultimately landed doing jumping in with Dad, doing his business. He was kind of due to retire, so I did it for a year and took over the reins, and then had the business, which was domestic lawn care. So we had about
Oh, right.
450 customers, went and saw them all 4 times a year, kind of weed, feed, scarifying, aeration, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that was certainly an adjustment to what I'd been doing before, because there were so many different skills that I then had to learn, managing a customer list, keeping everybody happy. And then obviously the efficiency from a routing perspective, you lose a customer, you have to then go and change the route a little bit to make sure that it's still feasible and makes sense to, with a schedules were busy with 450 customers, you're probably seeing 15 to 20 of them a day. So you had to be pretty on the ball with that. But it certainly taught me a lot.
I can imagine. I mean, wearing all those different hats, all those different kind of how do you even say it, like career changes as well. I think you learn a lot of life lessons along the way there, don't you?
Mm.
Did you ever, so, having, I guess, tried all of these different jobs, these different careers, eventually, working with your dad, was there ever a point where you truly felt settled? Did you feel settled when you were working with your dad?
Not really. I kind of especially the last 3 years or so, I've realised that I wanted to get out of Norfolk.
Mm.
Uh, I love the place, but it's just a bit too quiet for me, and I want something a little bit more central, a little bit more. Yeah, just with a little bit more going on, whether that's down south or heading towards the Midlands a little bit more. I haven't quite decided, and I'm open, but from a golf course perspective, there's not loads of good
Mm.
golf around here, and obviously I've got a big passion in playing different golf courses, and Norfolk is pretty uninspiring for golf courses, really. And it's obviously, I think it's one of the only counties without a motorway, so getting anywhere else is automatically just that little bit harder.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that was the
I
case.
think it's up in Cornwall off the top of my head. Yeah.
Really? Wow. Yeah, so I'm getting that it's parts of it is kind of the region and the geography rather than the actual work you were doing.
Yeah.
Which I get because obviously, like you said, you're, as we'll talk about in a second, golf has become a big passion of yours as well.
Yeah.
And something you want to surely stay involved in going forward. Before we dive into that, I'd love to explore, I guess, the reasoning behind starting this challenge, which I'll ask you to explain a little bit. I've obviously been watching a bunch of videos of yours and followed your story last year as well. And the recurring theme, I guess, that comes up throughout it is you talking about your mother. So I would love to hear, you mentioned very briefly about your parents, but I'd love to hear what she was like as a person.
I think selfless was the one word definition of mum. She was absolutely brilliant. I couldn't have asked for more, really. She was so happy to give up her time. I mean, she had a full-time job and she balanced that alongside looking after us and doing all the chores and the cooking and the cleaning and whatnot. And I think it's that cliche if you don't realize what you had until it's gone. But I think looking back at it now, having matured a significant amount because I was probably forced to, you realize the effort that she put in on a daily basis just to make sure that me and Dad were looked after. She was, she even spent some of the spare time that she had helping out a local hospice, which is one of the two charities that I raise money for. So it just goes to show, I just can't fathom it. Someone who just really didn't care about herself. She was more than happy. Her love language in a way was acts of service and making sure that everybody else was watered and fed and looked after.
Sounds like a wonderful person. And when you think of her now, obviously you mentioned selfless. What's the first image that comes to mind?
Just how dippy she used to be. She was always a great laugh, and I think that I've got this memory of her kind of always out the back window of the house, kind of peeking up and down under the window. And I'd always be if I was in a bad mood or anything like that, she'd always manage to, I've not got a very good poker face, so she'd always manage to make me laugh. And she'd just go outside and kind of look through the window and duck down and poke her head up again. And I just go, what are you doing? And it used to work every single time.
I don't think it matters how good of a poker face you have. I think mothers always have the ability to read their kids, don't they? I think there's some superpower there.
I think you're right. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I don't want to beat around the bush. If you don't mind talking about it, could you explain what happened with your mother?
Yeah. So we came back from Portugal, where we go every year, to this little timeshare place in May. Everything was fairly normal. And I think within a month of us coming back, she didn't start feeling too well. And she had a little bit of time off work. She couldn't sleep. I remember coming back in from a night out about something stupid like 5 or 6 in the morning, and she was just still up, kind of sat at the window. She just couldn't sleep, bless her. And so she went to the doctors who referred her. I think she had a little lesion somewhere on her neck, I believe. And we went to go and get that referred to the hospital, had a scan. And they kind of messed up the scan. The NHS weren't too good with us in our case, unfortunately, and there was an error in the system, which meant that the scan didn't get sent through to where it should have been. So we didn't hear anything for a month, and so we just wrote it off and thought that it was okay. And then she collapsed at home, so she got rushed into A&E, and it was then that they realised their mistake, and then they physically looked for it rather than should have had the notification coming through. And that's when we found out that she had cancer. She had lung cancer. And at that point, I think lung cancer is not a great one, because by the time that you catch it, it's too late. And we had about a month with her after that. So it was all a very dramatic change, from within the space of 2 months, her being absolutely fine to her being gone. And that something that lives with me and will live with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I mean, first off, I'm so sorry, especially not that it makes it any better or worse, but the fact that it all happened so quickly as well, it seems.
It's one of them. I mean, you look at it which way you want. I mean, I suppose some may say that it's a good thing that it happened so quickly and that she wasn't in pain, but it's that kind of reality, I suppose. You always want what you can't have, and so to be able to spend a bit more time with her and to ask her some questions would have gone a long way.
And something which I've discussed with other guests quite a lot as well is the theme of grief and how that shows up, because I think it's quite interesting how it shows up differently in different individuals. What did that, because it also happened so quickly, what did that period do to you? I know it's a bit of a high-level general question, but do you have any thoughts around that at all?
I think that it certainly changed the dynamic between me and Dad. I think Dad is very traditional in the way that he shows emotion. I could probably, before Mum passed, I certainly could count on one hand the amount of times that I'd seen him cry. And so I think I've certainly got that trait from him, which is that I don't tend to show emotion publicly very well. And so that changed that dynamic, and we had to work a way around it. We had to figure out what was happening next, because all of a sudden the person who brought me into this life and looked after me and probably mollycoddled me a little bit from day one is now gone. So it was not only was it the shock of having to deal with that, but it was then picking up the gap that she left behind, which was very difficult because she did an incredible amount for us. So it was things like cooking, it was things like cleaning, it was all of the little jobs and finding out how did Mum used to do that, and so it was that navigational period, which it almost an out of this world experience, because you don't realize it at the time, because you're almost feel like you're a bit on autopilot. You're shell shocked by what's just happened, and you almost can't quite believe it, and you've just got to get through it. And I think that's the attitude that I take, is this kind of stoicism, this just getting through. You've been dealt a hand of cards, and you've got to deal with it, and you've got no other option but to deal with it. And I think that's the way that we treated it.
And you mentioned how your attitude, I guess, is probably inherited from your dad in terms of the more, I guess, traditional approach of not necessarily talking or opening up very much, I think you mentioned. Did this experience change that? So did you find yourself talking to individuals about this, to friends, any kind of people in your network?
I wouldn't say so. I've always been I've always felt quite confident about the way that I deal with things. I mean, it is an independent, if I need advice, I'm certainly out there to ask for it. But I just found that it was quite I certainly appreciated the sentiment, but I didn't really get too much from people around that time, because obviously, if something like that happens, people want to check up on you and make sure that you're okay and whatnot. But the way that I saw it at that time was that, well, look, nothing's going to bring her back. If there's anything that you need, well, the only thing I needed at that time was mum back, and obviously that wasn't possible. So it was, everyone would offer help, and I had a good support system around me if I needed it, but I just didn't use it. I just kind of, I don't want to say went into my own shell, because I suppose I've always been, I'm an only child, so I've always been quite an independent person. So I just dealt with it the way that I saw fit. And I think it worked for the most part. It certainly encouraged me to pick up other habits in terms of, I learned to cook, and now I really enjoy cooking, which is the silver lining out of it. That's something that I'll cook a fair few nights a week for me and Dad, and trying out new recipes and being able to cook some of the things better than Mum could have, which was my little challenge to myself. I think that was it's just keeping yourself busy and not going down a hole. And there's so many people who go down this route of drinking or depression or whatever. And I can see it, because it's a really life-changing event. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but the bottom line is it's happened, and she wouldn't want you to sit wallowing and being down about the whole thing. So how do we go from here? That was the real next step.
What's your favorite recipe that you're cooking?
I think carbonara is something that lies with me, because there's quite a funny story with Mum about it. I had it once at the golf club by accident, and I was always a picky eater growing up, and they gave me the wrong dish. I was supposed to have like a tomato pasta, back to basics and what I know. And I had it, and I tried a bit, and I was like, do you know what? No, keep that there. I'm happy with this. So that was then my love for carbonara. And I'd probably still say it's my favorite dish. But Mum, bless her, she wasn't able to cook it very well. She was balancing so many different spinning plates, and she wasn't a fantastic cook. She'd obviously put the effort in, and we would have some very, very good meals. But I think, she wasn't the best in terms of adventurous recipes and stuff like that. So if she didn't know it, it was a no-go. So we managed to kind of get it nailed down with the sauce, but it was never great. So that was one thing that when she passed and I took on the baton of cooking, I was like, all right, this is one thing I'm going to do is get it going. And I think the first time I did it, it was scrambled eggs on pasta, because I'd put the egg on the heat, which was a you only do once mistake. But now I to the point where I'm struggling to have carbonara anywhere apart from an authentic Italian restaurant, because I can do it now myself. And so if it's not as good as my own, then I don't want it.
I love that. So I'm a big cook as well. I cook for the family almost every night. And funny enough, carbonara is the most requested dish by my wife as well. And I completely agree with you. It's something that, you need to get right, don't you? It's simple on paper, but it's
cream or with cheese, can't it? So it's, I've only ever done it with cheese. And at the start, I couldn't taste the difference, but now I certainly can. Yeah. And so if I go somewhere, it's almost like I see carbonara on the menu and I'm a little bit reluctant to order, because I don't want it to ruin my meal if it's made the wrong way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But maybe you should start a separate cooking podcast. That'd be quite interesting.
That would be interesting.
Yeah. Something I'm taking away from what you've said so far, though, is that you once your mother passed, it seems like you decided to take on, I guess, challenges for yourself, or partly obviously because you were half forced to, such as the cooking side of it, but then other things that you did to essentially keep yourself busy, but also help drive yourself forward. And I guess that then leads us on to what you ended up doing last year. as well. Could you explain a little bit about what I guess the origins of the challenge that you decided to take on? What kind of at what point did you sit there and say, do you know what? I'm going to do this. This sounds cool, or this sounds fun.
I probably hit the button to actually do the record about November time. So I didn't really give myself, I started in January 2025. So I didn't really give myself a great deal of time, but I'd certainly thought about it and contemplated for a long period of time. The whole kind of idea kicked off on a trip to the Netherlands with a really good friend who put the idea into my head. I said, one day I'd love to retire and buy a motorhome and travel around playing golf courses, because that's just something I really enjoy doing. And he mentioned the world record had just been beaten, and why didn't you have a crack at that? And I said, well, look, this is a stupid idea. And I spent a bit of time thinking about it, and then I'd go back to him and ask him questions. Well, what about this? What about that? And he's a very intelligent guy. When he speaks, I listen. And the more questions I came to him with, the more he just blew me out of the water, because every reply was, it was a good idea. And I thought, you know what, this is nuts. And then it was the case of seeing if the whole thing was financially possible. If with the savings that I had, was it logistically possible? How would I cope mentally? How would I cope physically? So that was then it's probably around May time, 2024. So I then spent a lot of time doing as much digging as I could. I spoke to the guy who had the 580, the previous record. And then from there, I emailed loads and loads of golf clubs to see if it was feasible, and before you know it, I was hitting the button and absolutely scared out of my head.
Imagine, yeah. But it seems like you started the planning fairly far in advance, it seems, or at least the idea was in your head. It wasn't something that you just decided, I'm going to start doing this tomorrow.
No, you couldn't. I don't think you could,
no.
just with the logistical side of it.
Yeah. And to what extent? So obviously you spoke about you were in the Netherlands with a good friend of yours and spoke through the idea with him. To what extent was the original idea kind of, do you think, driven by what had happened a few months before that with your mother passing?
It certainly made a difference, and I think looking back on it, I would have never have done something like that if Mum was still alive. It wouldn't have even popped up into my head. I think it just made me realise that, you know what, life is short, and it was all well and good me talking about this idea or playing a load of golf courses in a motorhome when I retire, but Mum never got to retire. She died at 61, and so that was always at the back of my head, which is that we only get one crack at this. No one knows what happens to us at the end. So am I gonna, option A, which was very safe, which was staying at home and living in Norfolk, having a business that pays me a good amount of money, gives me good freedom and a massive amount of flexibility to, manage my own schedule and go on little golf trips and do stuff like that if I wanted to, or this brand new path that's just opened up ahead of me, which is that filled with all kinds of unknown, but it will be a really cool year. I think Mum certainly kicked off that path.
Yeah. So interesting. And then you obviously spoke about kind of the idea started taking action in May the year before. What did you briefly mentioned it already, but what did the logistics look like of the planning? So you obviously mentioned motorhome. So did you buy a motorhome? What did the planning look like in terms of reaching out to golf clubs? Were they fairly open to the idea? Just very curious about the whole planning aspect of it, really.
So the first step that I made after speaking to, I think it was before speaking to Patrick, was trying to gauge what kind of response I was going to get from golf clubs. Mm-hmm. So I've always been very passionate, and the content that I made before the world record was playing the top 100 golf courses in England. So I think before I started, I'd done 72, and I knew all of the names pretty of by heart and the locations at this point. And that's my little autistic trait for sure. And I reached out to the 100 minus the really exclusive ones, the Wentworths and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I just popped an email, copy and paste email saying, hello there, my name's Josh. This is what I'm going to try and do next year. Just wondering if you'd be able to look after me. Because I realized quite early on that if I was going to do something like this, paying a green fee for every round of golf is just very, very difficult. Yeah. And I think within the culture of golf in the UK, everyone is quite friendly, and charities are well looked over. Certainly when I went abroad, you don't see that as much. And it was just then, I emailed I think 95 or so, the top 100, and I had about 20 come back to me and said, hi Josh, great idea, we'll look after you. And I thought, well, that's a good start because, 20%, 18% or whatever hit rate, and there's thousands of golf courses in England or in the UK. If I could get a 20% hit rate of every golf course in the UK, I wouldn't have to pay golf for a year.
Good, yeah.
So then I had a friend who reached out to all of the golf courses in England. He basically developed a program to automatically email, and we probably had about 100 come back. Again, so I was like, well, this is a start. This is 120 or 130. So then it was the logistics of, speaking to Patrick and trying to pick his brain, because the two things I couldn't figure out were how to cope physically with the whole thing and how to cope mentally with it. And there were the two things that I really wanted to try and get some insight on. And Patrick was very blasé around it. And, oh, well, it's fine. You physically, you're absolutely fine. And to be fair,
and Patrick's the previous record holder, right? Is that right?
Sorry, yes, Patrick's the guy. He broke it.
Yeah.
Not long before. I think by the time I'd reached out to him, he'd been that record holder for about 6 months. So in hindsight, I probably wouldn't have been as forthcoming and good as he was. But that was the bottom line, and I needed to try and figure out those things. There was a logistics that I needed to implement that Patrick couldn't do. I thought doing it in the UK was good and bad because we don't get the weather that maybe Florida gets in the winter time, but in the UK the courses are a lot closer together. So there was that kind of trade-off. But Patrick had a bus-sized RV, whereas if I was going to do it in a motorhome, which I ended up doing and buying one, I needed to do it much smaller. So I needed a far more compact one, because you're not going to get into golf club car parks with a bus-sized thing. So it was all of them kind of logistics that got involved. And then once I'd hit the button on it, I needed to, I created a website which I wanted to try and put in as much legwork before the record as I could, because I knew I'd be super busy when I was on the road. And so created a website which would handle a lot of the traffic of people inviting me to their course, which happened in absolute bucket loads. And by the end of it, we probably had about 1,200 invites to golf courses.
That's insane.
So there was a website. People could say, hi, Josh, I'm a member of X golf course. I'm available on these days. Here are my contact information. And so
I love that.
I had a friend who then put them all on a map for me. And so we had a visual of where every golf course was. And then a couple of months in, I had the two logistics guys come in who are now very, very good friends. And again, completely selfless. They didn't take anything from the year. They just really wanted to help and get behind the story. And they had that kind of little scratch that needed itching, which was the logistical side of it. So they would be reaching out to the golf courses, and from there it was it was just not sustainable from doing it as a one person band, and I realized that quite early on.
Yeah, but that's great, and I mean, unbelievable to hear the reception it received, right, and the amount of the influx that you got of messages from golfers around the country being willing to host you. That's something.
it was something that I'll take away is the golf community. I realized it before with doing the top 100, messages from people who would see my journey and say, do you want to come and play Wentworth, which is a course that many dream of playing? And to basically, it's just that on steroids with the world record. Everybody has their own cancer story. They've lost someone. And I think it resonated with a lot of people. And so people would see it and really want to try and help out. And there was so many people that I didn't get the opportunity to play with because the logistics didn't work, or I had so many invites. But it really does shine a light on just how great a sport it is. You could, in what world does a 85-year-old guy hang around with a 15-year-old for 4 hours? It's crazy. And I think everyone has this common love for a sport, and I think there's so much good that comes out of golf.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing this as well with Florio, is exactly that. It's the community that exists, right? And age doesn't matter, and everyone's kind of just out there trying to get this bloody little ball in that shitty little hole over there. We all have this kind of common goal, and everyone just gets together. And exactly like you said, everyone has their own story, right? And everyone can kind of has the ability to share their story and resonate with other people's story as well. And I think this is a prime example of that. You've had so many people reach out to you because either they just wanted to support what you were doing, or, something in your story kind of resonated with them specifically. It's just so nice to hear, that there was such a supportive outcome.
Oh yeah, 100%. And that's something that I will take with me to the grave. Is understanding how good not just golf is, but people. The amount of love that I was shown last year was quite hard to take it all in at the start. It was something that I really struggled to accept, because these are random strangers who I didn't know, and they're offering drinks at the bar, or food, or inviting me to their house for tea, or letting me sleep round. And I'm like, this is people that I've got no idea who they are. And that it just goes to show that there are good people out. And I think with the media and the way that society is nowadays, we're trained to only see the shocking standout headlines, and to see that there is actually some real kind of authenticity behind people that most probably won't see. That's it's really wholesome.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Going back, you briefly mentioned they're going back to the start of this journey. So January hits. You, I guess, get into your motorhome, hit the road. What was that like? Was it what did you feel? Were you scared, intimidated, excited? What was kind of going through your head when you first started the journey?
I remember leaving home and saying goodbye to my friends and dad, and I was really nervous. I remember turning around very quickly because I'd forgotten something. I'd only been on the road 5 minutes before I needed to come back home and get something out of the fridge. I made the drive. It's probably about an hour and 20 minutes up to Woodall Spa.
Oh yeah.
For day one.
Great course.
I play there regularly. I'm a member there.
Okay.
And so I wanted to start there where I played my golf. And yeah, it was tough. It was cold. It was miserable. The weather wasn't great. They're not ideal conditions for playing golf. And I remember the heating in the motorhome certainly didn't work for the first month or so. So it was a lot of cold nights and wearing clothes to bed and sleeping under blankets and whatnot. But I think the flip side of that is that if I had the opportunity again, I probably would have started at the same time, because it's exciting. And I think that takes away from the fact that you're starting in January when it's miserable. If you started in April, you might be able to pick up a good amount of courses very quickly, but you've got that kind of uncertainty around the last few months, what the weather's going to do, but also you're coming from the high going to the low. Whereas I started in January, going to get the worst of the weather out of the way very early on, and then I had things to look forward to. And I think that was the key last year: is what have I got to look forward to? Because when you're playing golf every day, it can't just be playing golf, because it's a job now, it's work. So were there certain areas that I were looking forward to going into? I mean, I remember Surrey I did in April, and I love Surrey as a region for golf. And so then it was, I've not done Scotland yet, or Wales. I've never been to Wales. So the first time I went to Wales was for the record. And so I then went through Wales, and I've got Scotland to look forward to. Or is it maybe that I've got people that I've played with before, or good friends who are coming to see me along the way and play around in golf? And it was just, that was the fortitude that I needed to keep pushing on.
Yeah. And you mentioned it there. So, I think people excuse me, I think people hear, ooh, playing golf every day and think, wow, you're living the dream, which I'm sure to some extent you obviously came away with a lot of really great memorable experiences, but what's the reality like playing golf every single day, potentially multiple rounds per day? Was it a dream?
Looking back at it, it was really, really cool. During it was tough. It was a big mental battle. The physical side of it, I obviously had no idea before I started the record, but wasn't so difficult. I think your body just builds up a tolerance to playing that much golf. And so even now, if I play 36 holes, I struggle even after what I've done. And so I think there was that side of it, but the mental was the real tough part, is waking up again, stupid o'clock in the morning, rocking onto the first tee. You're meeting one or two mostly different people who are asking the same questions. I mean, you could be asked the same question 4 or 5 times in a day, because you'd be walking down the fairway or down the left side with one person, and then the guy on the other side of the fairway and the next hole might ask you the same question.
Yeah.
And you'd get a lot of that. Again, if I was in their shoes, I would be doing the exact same thing. And I enjoyed it, and I made sure that I gave my all when it came to that kind of stuff, because I would be extremely curious about what kind of bonkers thing that guy is doing. So there was that side of it. But for the most part, yeah, it wasn't too much of an issue. It's just the monotonous side of it was waking up every day and playing another 18 holes, then lunch, then 18 holes. It was a scheduled thing that you were doing every single day for a year. And I think it's interesting, because it doesn't get much sympathy with people outside of golf, because I think, oh, you live in the dream. And I think when even people who play golf might look at that on the cusp and go, bloody hell, that's all right. And then they think about it a bit more, and they're like, well, actually, that's 1 point, that's 2 a day. And you're like, yeah, it is.
And that's exactly why I'm asking, because I look at it, and obviously my first thought when I first came across, what you were doing, I was like, oh, that's amazing, what a life kind of thing. But then, when you start seeing, it's like, bloody hell, he's still going. It's like, I now struggle playing a couple times a week without getting physically sore, and then, mentally, obviously, it takes a grind on you. And then I think you raise a really interesting point, which I didn't even think about, is the fact that obviously the role that you were in, it wasn't only you going out by yourself and playing golf, you also had to kind of somewhat put on a professional face, I guess, and, speak to individuals, strangers most of the time, representatives, and, keep that smile going again. And like you said, you're a bit of a broken record in terms of repeating yourself 5 times a day. I'm sure that could take
it's
a bit of a
an
toll.
Interesting dynamic, because I'd all of a sudden be pushed into this spotlight of people knowing who I was, but I not knowing who they were. And so it gets to the point, especially as the challenge picked up a bit of pace, that people had heard about it. And so I would probably more often go to a golf club, pull up in the van, and people see that and instantly know that or know what I was doing or know my name or anything like that. And so it's kind of a strange experience, a strange sensation, because I'd be walking around the clubhouse and people would come and shake my hands, or like I was the club champion or something. It was crazy. And so that was something that I had to get used to as well. Certainly it was that show. And you treat it like you're at work. You put on that kind of corporate face. And I had to do that for 10 hours a day, every day at these golf courses, and then once the 2 courses for the most part had been played, I'd then go and do my own little thing. Often I'd have an invite from someone, oh, do you want to come around for tea, or can I buy you dinner, but more often than not, I kind of needed to recharge the social batteries and actually have a little bit of time by myself, and also to get on with a lot of the stuff that I needed to get on with, replying to messages, emails, making the video that I'd post on social media every day, the logistical side, making sure that we were reaching out to people, and the route that we were taking was the area that I wanted to go.
Yeah. Full-time job, essentially, by the sounds of it. What did you do? You mentioned, recharge the batteries. What are some things that you would do for yourself, once the rounds were over and you were done socializing, I guess?
Didn't really have a lot of time for myself. I remember, especially at the start, the first few months, I was doing everything, including the booking myself. And so I remember vividly that it was genuinely every waking hour of every day I was investing into this. It was waking up in the morning, playing 18 holes, socializing, having a drink, going to the next course, playing another 18 holes, socializing, having a drink, then trying to have a shower at the golf club. If failing that, if they shut early, then I'd have to go and try and find a gym add a membership gym to get a shower at. And then it's stick on where I'm going to go next to the course tomorrow, find somewhere on the way to eat, park up either in the car park of the golf club or close by for the morning ahead, make the video and get done with admin stuff. But that was pretty much it. I mean, I'd often take my laptop in with me to dinner to try and get some stuff done. But even after I had a couple of guys helping me, it was still a very full-on thing, and I wasn't able to let my brain sleep because they were helping, but that just allowed me to do other stuff that I needed to do anyway.
Yeah.
So stuff that people don't realize, the logistics of getting your clothes washed, for example. I mean, that was
true. Yeah.
Straight away. That was a tough one, but I was relying at the start of people kind of doing it. I had a few people offer very kindly to do it, which was, again, a very strange experience, sifting through boxes and stuff like that. But I then found a brilliant little company who have washing machines on the side of kind of gas stations and service stations and places like that. And before you know it, I was sat there, chuck it all in, wait an hour, it'd be washed and dried. And whilst that was happening, I could then get on with the other stuff that I needed to get on with.
So you'd found a routine that worked for you essentially on the road.
That was massive. That was something that was you had to have.
Yeah. But I mean, from outside looking in, it sounds like it can be draining. Did you ever have a point where you thought, I can't do this anymore?
No.
No?
I think
okay.
There was a lot of motivating factors. I've always been someone that says, I learned that from Dad, especially with the business. If I'm going to say I'm going to do something, then I'm going to do it. And so I knew, short of being physically incapable, that because I'd risked so much to get to that stage of giving up the business, that I'm not going to be able to get back, putting all of my eggs in this one basket. Especially, and Dad's reaction to the whole thing was probably as you'd expect a dad to be, which is, what on earth are you doing? Giving up something that I've given you that's going to set you up for life to just go out on a whim and buy my home and travel up and down the country. So at that level, I couldn't fail.
Yeah. And we actually haven't talked about this. What were the causes that you were raising money throughout all of this from what I've gathered. What were the charities or the causes you were
So we had two,
looking for?
Macmillan, obviously a
Hmm.
household name, and they do some fantastic work. And then we've also got a hospice up near me in Norfolk called Tapping House, which is a fantastic charity. Mum did a lot of fundraising for them.
Yeah, you
So
mentioned.
it
Yeah.
was just a no-brainer. So yeah, she'd often help out, and they used to have these what they called the tulip fields. I don't know if any of your listeners will have seen the I can't remember the name of the film now. This it's a Disney film, but there's a scene. It's not long come out, but there's a scene with these glorious tulip fields, and that was filmed there. So that once a year they
Oh, okay.
open up this field for people to go and have a look at and take your Instagram photos and whatnot. And people travel from up and down the country to Wicked. That was what it was.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. Yeah.
and yeah, so they that was featured on that. But yeah, they earn a lot of money from that, which is good.
Amazing. No, that's amazing. And um, so you obviously, how many courses did you end up playing? Remind me.
652.
652 in a year. What were your favorite courses? If you had to pick three, let's say.
Uh, I'd probably pick one from Wales. Sorry, one from Northern Ireland, one from Scotland, one from England. If I had to do three, I'd probably go Northern Ireland, Royal County Down, which I think would be top of the list.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought it was absolutely out of this world. Scotland is really, really tough because there's so many good links courses up there.
Yeah.
And it's a very cutthroat industry, in terms of the rankings up there, because all of them, any of the top 20, you could argue a case for. I'd probably have to lean towards Kingsbarns. I think it's a very dramatic course, and I think it's just a stunner. And then in England, I think for me it's a fairly easy one. I think Sunningdale Old is probably one of the best Heathland golf courses I've ever played.
I think all of those I've been nodding along. I couldn't agree more. I used to caddy at Kingsbarns actually. I was a caddy up there, so that was one of the best jobs I ever had, was being able to walk those fairways every day. Unbelievable track.
So good.
Yeah. And then Sunningdale, I've not actually had the pleasure of playing yet. I went to watch the Senior British Open there last year, but thought, oh my God, what a course. I just wanted to get out there on the bucket list. But
It's well worth playing. It's not cheap, mind, but
no.
it's worth every penny.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting you mentioned about Scotland, because there's so many good golf courses up there. Were there any kind of hidden gems that, you'd never really heard of before, maybe, that you played and thought, oof, this is a track?
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, the council courses in Scotland are really good. That's one thing I was surprised by. We don't really do much of that down in England, but it just makes golf a lot more affordable, and they're good golf courses as well. In terms of hidden gems, I think I played one up around Glasgow called Haston, which I remember as a parkland course. It probably cost you 30 quid to play, but I was just blown away by it. I thought it was a really cool and quirky layout. Played one in Wales called Borth and Unislas, which is, if any of your listeners are familiar with Wales and golf, there's a course called Aberdyfi. It's about 45 minutes south of that. It's a very, very true links course. 9 holes you play in the exact same, 8 holes you play in the exact same direction, and then you turn around and you play 10 holes in the opposite direction. There's no deviation. There's no kind of different angles. And I'd never really played anything as true as that before. And then one in England, I'd probably say Longcliffe, which is up in, I think it's Loughborough way.
Okay.
Again, I'd never heard anything about it, and I was really surprised. I'd love to get back there in the summer. I actually played with a member last week, funnily enough, there. But I want to get back there because I played it in February or something like that, and when it wasn't at its best. But yeah, it was a really cool kind of forest course, little par 3 start. But I think it's I'd love to see if that makes it into the top 100 list at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think it's interesting just because there's so many good golf courses all around the UK. And obviously there's the big famous ones, but then there's so many that,
Yeah.
deserve a lot more attention, I feel like, than they they currently get. There's so many out there. I read somewhere that one of the rounds you played during that year was Christmas Day, I believe, with your dad. Is that right?
Yeah, so that was one thing that I wanted to do. Once I'd got the first few months out of the way, I'd managed to play every day. Even if courses, I'd be playing one course and it'd shut, I'd still find a way around it. And yeah, I wanted to play every single day of the challenge. That was something that I didn't need to do, but I just in kind of ingrained in my head that it was a non-negotiable. And so Christmas Day was, I'd obviously got to day 300 or whatever, and I'd still haven't broke it. So I had to kind of say, well, Dad, look, I need to keep this streak alive. Can we go somewhere close to home and play? So we got up crack of dawn Christmas morning, and he just walked around with me for, I think it took us an hour and a half, no, probably 2 hours, I think. And yeah, just cracked it around. There was a few other. I did hear a 4 shout. I didn't see anyone else on the course, but I did hear a 4 shout. So there was some other people on the course who were crazy as I was. But yeah, got that done, got that out of the way quickly, and then yeah, I went and enjoyed Christmas.
And that round, I mean, because it's obviously slightly different to what you were describing earlier. Where you're traveling course to course and then, getting up, going out there, putting a professional face on. This is you and your dad alone on a golf course. What was that like? Was it different for you? Were the conversations different on the golf course? Was there any kind of sense of reflection on everything you'd done that year? Just would like to get a sense of, what the day or the golf round was like, really.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, at that point, I'd already broken the record. So it was the case of trying to build up the number as much as I could. And I hadn't seen Dad in a while before then. I mean, I suppose I'd seen him maybe 3 weeks before at the day that I broke the record. But apart from that, I'd barely seen him all year. I think I probably saw him maybe 3 or 4 times.
Wow.
So it was good to kind of have a bit of a catch up and, and yeah, I reflect a little bit on what was a really cool year, because I think, I certainly had no idea what the year would have in store, but Dad would have been the exact same. And I suppose for him, he had no control over it either. He was just kind of a third party. He was a spectator in the kind of watching it all unfold. So I'm sure he would have wanted me to do well. And at that point, it was nice because it had happened. I'd already got the record.
Was there any conversation about, your family, your mother at all? Or was it more just about everything you had achieved that past year?
No, I think it's we don't tend to talk too much about that.
Okay.
I think it's, yeah, I don't know. I think it's just a way that we kind of deal with things. So it was more focused around the plans around Christmas and obviously having a catch up. And yeah, I think that was pretty much it.
And then take me to the finish line. So I believe it was at Prince's. Is that right?
Prince's was the last day of the challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just around the corner from me, actually. I live 15, 20 minutes away from there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's close to home. But taking me back to that day, what was the feeling going through your head at that moment?
It was bittersweet, really.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. It was the end of an era for me. It was. I'd been doing something for 364 days, and this day was the same as everything else, except there were a load of people there and a few cameras, and it was a really nice celebration. But it was sad because I'd built up an incredible friendship with these 2 guys who had given up more than half of their year to just help, and any extra time, any spare time that they had, they would be ringing golf clubs or messaging members to try and get this logistically possible. And so I'd built up such a fantastic relationship with them that this was all going to all of a sudden stop. And yeah, it was tough. I mean, there was a lot more emotion on the day that I broke the record.
Okay.
That was a really big day for me. especially playing with Dad there. But yeah, it was a really cool day, and it was something that was quite strange to me because the 2 days were we had a charity day at both of them, so there were a load of people there, friends, family, and it was strange that everybody was here because of me. And it was something that I really struggled to get my head around, because it's quite weird. I post videos on social media and stuff like that, but at the start, especially of the year, it was really hard for me to accept the attention. I'd drive into a golf course and someone would point at the van and look, and I'd be like, I didn't like that. And I'm like, well, this is the whole point. Like I've got the van liveried up for a reason. And so I had to kind of get used to that level of attention. And the whole of that day was geared around me. It was people that I'd played with earlier in the year who all wanted to be part of it. And again, it just goes to show how good the golf community is.
And is it something you eventually got used to throughout the year, the attention, I guess?
Yeah, 100%. I think so. You develop confidence from it, because it's almost like Groundhog Day, because you've got something is happening every single day, twice a day. So you're just rinsing and repeating. The second that you get out of that van in the morning at the golf club, there's probably someone around who's looking to see if there's any signs of life around the van, as to see if I'm awake or what I'm doing, because they're playing with me and they want to come and introduce themselves. So it's the second that happens, you've got this kind of process that's repeated every single day. So I remember there were a few occasions last year where I replied in a way that I probably wasn't too happy with, and that was just because I was tired. I remember one guy who came up and he was like, "So what's this all about then?" As I was getting the clubs out of the car. And I said, well, just look at the van, mate. It says it on the side of the van. And I realized it was an old boy, and I realized that I shouldn't have done that. And I was groggy and I was not in a good mood that morning. But you learn from that.
Yeah.
I went away from that thinking about that all day, because I was like, well, he didn't deserve for me to treat him that way. And so I learned, and again, it was just that from a character development point of view, it was taking those little tidbits and improving from them. And I feel like by the end of it, I'd got pretty good at it, because I'd done it, 600 odd times.
Yeah. Well, exactly as you said, right? It's just from practice that you develop, and you learn from mistakes. It's and I think it's not beating yourself up about it as well, which it doesn't seem like you did do. But yeah, I mean, in your scenario, it's you can't be 100% perfect all the time. When you're in the limelight, I would say a lot of the times. Yeah.
That's what developed for me a weird kind of understanding of celebrities and the way that they work, because it's, they're obviously very lucky in life. They've certainly drawn a long straw, but they, some people do one thing and they can get cancelled for it. They can say one slip of the tongue, one day where they might be drunk and have done something stupid, or one day where they're in a bad mood like I was and said something. The difference is that it's probably going to be on camera and it's going to be posted, and it will divide attention. Whereas what I did, it was just between me and that guy. And so I've developed a real understanding of that. It's not always something that's, it's not always the good side of it. There are some negatives as well. Obviously, I think in their case, the positives certainly outweigh them. But yeah, it certainly changed my perception a little bit.
Yeah, interesting. And you then, so, the finish line was there, Princess happened. You, I'm assuming, drive your motorhome, your van back to Norfolk. What happened to you then? Emotionally, when the thing that kind of kept you moving for a full year suddenly stops, I guess.
It was really tough. I remember, I'd had a year of waking up stupidly early, and I've always been someone who likes to lay in. So that was the first thing I did. I don't really remember. It's I suppose it's all become a bit of a blur now, but I remember going down the range within a few days. I think I was probably within about 4 days. I was on the range, just clipping a few balls and whatnot. Pulled up in the van, but yeah, I think it was obviously a big shock to the system from going all of a sudden from everything happening to nothing. And so it was a few days of trying to get through all the messages and people trying to sort podcasts and interviews out. So I think within the first few weeks I had to go down to London. I was on Channel 5 on Sky Sports, so
Wow.
it was just stuff like that I had to organize. So the logistical side probably carried on for a little while after.
And did you, so obviously the logistical side carried on for a little bit, and then I guess things settled down a little bit. What did that change in routine do to you? So did it impact kind of how you were thinking about your future, about, your mum, even everything you'd achieved? Did that kind of change in routine do something for you?
Not really. I mean, it's interesting because when I tell people about what I've done, everybody looks so shocked and, oh my God, wow. And, and meeting friends back home for the first time who I'd maybe not seen in a year, they're blown away by it. But the reality is I'm just me still. I don't look at it with that kind of amazement because I lived it. And so to me, it's normalized. And so when I went back home, it was a real tough adjustment because it had gone from 100 to 0 very quickly. I'd gone from this little social media sensation, if you will, who's rocking around golf courses and being noticed and meeting probably 10 to 15 people a day on average.
That's
and
crazy.
All of a sudden, I'm just a day where I might not see anyone else.
Yeah.
It was a real tough adjustment to start with, but my excuse is that if I can do something like that that's as crazy as that, then there's no excuse for me to not mope around and just kind of be a bit sad on myself.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And now that you've had time to digest everything, a bit of time has passed since then. When you look back at that year, everything you experienced, what impact do you think that had on your grief and how you were, getting through, what had happened with your mother?
I think people handle grief in different ways. That's something that I've really noticed. Some people go down a dark little hole. Some people will maybe resort to drink or drugs or isolation, or there's so many different ways that people can do it. And I think I was very conscious about that. And I've always had this attitude of, well, whatever I've got in front of me, I'm just going to deal with. And so maybe I really didn't want to go down one of them dark paths, and that was what kind of spurred me on, maybe subconsciously, to do something like this because it would keep me busy, and it certainly did that. I didn't have I barely had time to even think last year, so it really helped on that front. I think that was, I think that I certainly took a lot from that.
No, I mean, I think that makes sense to me. I think it's like you say, even if it was subconscious, it's the idea of doing something, getting your hands dirty, essentially going and doing something, doing an activity, a challenge, whatever it may be, something to look forward to. But as you said, exactly right, everyone. And that's why I'm always curious about asking is, that grief gets experienced in so many different ways. There's no right or wrong way either, right? It's different for everyone. I just think it's interesting and inspiring to see what you did with it.
Thank you.
And turned it into something positive, and at the same time, raising a lot of money for some important causes as well.
Yeah, that was the one thing that I took from it. If I could inspire someone else to do something and to show that you don't have to live this kind of technical life of that you fall into this trap of getting a job and whatnot. If you see something there, you only get one shot at it. And I think I was petrified at the fact that I could look back at that in 20 years, having not pushed the button and go, what could have been?
Yeah. And after, all those golf courses, hundreds of strangers met, motorhome, bad weather, good weather, pride, exhaustion, what did that year teach you, looking back now, about yourself?
Just need to trust myself a little bit more. I'm not very good at backing myself, which looking back at it now, I'm surprised that I even hit the button on it, because I'm not the kind of person to take risks like that and to back myself. And so I think that really gave me encouragement to put my mind to something and to, to make it work. And I think that'll help me in the future. I think the golf community, as I said before, it just goes to show that there are people I've met through this year, friends for life. There will be people that I now can go to up to Scotland and be like, can we, let's catch up, should we go for a beer or whatnot? And so that certainly I took a lot from. I think the golf community is a magnificent place, from so many people, from so many different backgrounds, cultures, male, female, whatever. I think there is so much that people could learn, and it's amazing because people who don't play just kind of have this elitist view of it, and that it's there's a high threshold for entry into it, and then if you manage to get in, it's an incredible place.
Not agree more. Last question. So when people hear your story at the moment, obviously the first thing that comes to mind is the world record. But is there anything that you hope that they understand beyond the record? Is there something else you want to be remembered for, I guess, under the surface?
It's a good question. Is it something I want to be remembered for? I don't really know how to answer that. I think the record is something that I'm immensely proud of, and I mean, again, who knows how long it'll last. But yeah, I wanted to give back. I wanted to do something good, and I hope that's how people see me.
Well, I, for one, find, like I've already mentioned, extremely inspirational. I was, like I said, following along all of last year and had a lot of opinions about it. I thought mostly, like I said, thought very inspirational. Had times where I thought, God, he's mad. What is he doing? But overall, unbelievable thing that you did. All for a great cause, but also seemingly, from what we discussed today as well, for your own sake as well. And yeah, I just really want to thank you for taking the time to chat a little bit more about that.
No, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and really looking forward to continuing following your journey and seeing where it takes you next. Hopefully, somewhere else in the golf world.
Thank you.
Something that keeps growing your passions.
A few ideas on the horizon, so we'll see what comes to fruition. But yeah, it's one of them. If I can do something like that, there's no excuses. I've got to go to the gym 3 times a week, and that's the kind of attitude I have to everything now. Well, if I did that, then what's going to the gym?
Yeah, that's true. Goes back to, like you said, setting goals and giving yourself some challenges.
100%.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much, Josh. Really appreciate it.
More than welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.